Greatest franchise in the National Football League, the most unique story in all of sports.
You hear it all the time. People make reference to it as Titletown.
The story of the Green Bay Packers really resonates throughout this country and hopefully throughout the world.
It is the historic place in the NFL.
When you get right down to it, there's nobody that matches up with this place right here in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Gentlemen, this is the most important play we have. The play we must make though.
The Vince Lombardi Trophy is coming home where it started.
Franchises such as the Packers, which represent small communities and have had a rich history between the team, the players, the coaches, the administrators, and the community, that's priceless.
This town may not be in New York City, it may not be Philadelphia or Chicago. These worldly cities, they may think they're better than Green Bay, Wisconsin, but when it comes to football, not so much.
It cannot just be about bigness and size. It's got to be about merit, talent, innovation, change, and competition. And in many ways, that's what Green Bay represents.
That strong link, that strong sense of identity, that this football team is part of this community. In Green Bay, people care about the Packers.
How can you not love a small city team competing with the biggest cities throughout the country, and not only competing, but excelling?
Valentine's Day, 1930. The Fox Theater opens in downtown Green Bay. More than 5,000 people stand in line, anxious to view scenes from the Packers' fall victory over the New York Giants, en route to their first NFL championship.
Certainly their biggest game in the 1920s, one of their biggest games ever.
1929, what did they give up? 22 points the entire season? So you just didn't score on the Packers that year. There were enough folks back then who believed in them, who wanted them to survive.
The Green Bay fans love their Packers. And of course, a good time.
Liquor flowed freely in Green Bay. Prohibition was practically non-existent here.
It's always been a bibulous community, and particularly during Prohibition.
There were a number of stills that were set up right in the community. There was 15,000 gallons of mash in this little bitty house, and they figured that they were turning out about 1,000 gallons of alcohol a day, and nobody saw anybody coming and going. Really? Really? Okay.
It was pretty well open on the street. You got to understand that it didn't have the communication ability that we have today. The only communication you had was word of mouth and telephone.
Because of the way the telephone system worked at the time, the switchboard operators at the telephone company knew exactly what was going on. When the feds would call from Milwaukee to notify the local police that there was going to be a raid in Green Bay, by the time they got here, everything was gone.
Johnny Blood said he fell in love with this city shortly after he got here because there was a Prohibition raid and they arrested all the barkeepers, but the federal Prohibition agent is the one that ended up serving time and the bartenders all got off scot-free.
One of the reasons why the mob didn't get a foothold into Green Bay was because Green Bay didn't need them. Green Bay didn't need anybody to provide illegal liquor because it was here.
With a snub to Prohibition, visiting teams and their fans found entertainment at every corner.
Football fans, when they came to town, there were speakeasies all over the place that they could go to and celebrate and drink all weekend. Green Bay also had a thriving red light district on the north side of town.
A favorite, an establishment called the Silver Slipper.
It was built in 1928 as a speakeasy. You went through a trapdoor that was the old kitchen, and you went down, and it was about a 6.5-foot clearance overhead. Then you went down 2 steps into the drinking room. It had 6 bedrooms upstairs. The girls entertained people up there.
This has been party town since the beginning. It certainly hasn't hurt the Packers.
Johnny Blood was playing for the Pottsville Maroons in Pennsylvania in the NFL. Curly Lambeau is highly enamored of Johnny's talents. He sent a note to Johnny following the 1928 season. He said, "Dear John, if you'll join the Green Bay Packers for the 1929 NFL season, I will pay you $100 a game. If you do not drink after Wednesday night before each game, I'll pay you $110 a game." And Johnny wrote back and said, "I'll take the 100.
That was one of the things about out-of-town teams coming to Green Bay, was that they knew they were going to be able to have a good time.
Packers players are staples in the community.
Almost all the players stayed at the Astor Hotel. The single players for sure. They only needed a place to stay for a couple months.
They devour all-you-can-eat meals at the YWCA for the sum of 75 cents. Go to movies at the Orpheum and attend church on Sunday.
Green Bay, it was a special place, a unique place, and you could always feel how special it was to be there for a game and how important football was to the community.
There's a much more intimate relationship between the players and the townspeople, and that relationship consists of not only being in a bar with them, but seeing them in the grocery store, seeing them downtown, seeing them all over the place.
People left them alone. They weren't all looking for autographs and things like that.
I don't think you could find a better place in the world to live at. Play football. All the people in the city certainly knew you, observed you, would speak to you, except when the Bears would beat you, then we always walked down the alleys, and you might find somebody there to speak to you.
Packers got an awful lot of publicity, and Calhoun had something to do with that. He was not only the sports writer that was covering the team, but he was also serving as the PR man for the Packers.
George Calhoun would entertain the visiting writers who came to Green Bay. It was almost like a salon the day before or 2 days before, whenever they got to town.
Calhoun also takes the show on the road.
And when he'd go to places like New York and Chicago, rather than go around and make the rounds of the newspaper offices, he'd invite all the sports writers to his hotel room.
George would set up in a hotel room with a bathtub full of beer. And these reporters would come by, shoot the breeze with George, and learn about the Packers.
It is crucial to the Packers' survival that they draw big in the NFL's biggest cities.
Time and time again, Lambeau would talk about how critical it was for the Packers to field a good team, a competitive team that could beat these big city teams, because what was most important to their survival, or at the gate anyway, was drawing well on the road.
Even as a small city, Green Bay carries some luxuries. Opening as the largest hotel in Wisconsin, away teams are hosted at the Hotel Northland.
The visiting teams at that time dressed at the Northland Hotel and then took city buses to City Stadium. The police were there to stop the pedestrians and let the buses through. We happened to be the last people they didn't let cross. So I'm standing with my dad and my uncle. The Bear players are all on the bus with their arm on the window, jerseys. And one of the Bear players reached down, he mussed my hair and said, "Enjoy the game today, Buckshot." And I thought, well, they can't be bad guys.
They have to win big, or at least win. It happens in grand style in October 1930. 11,000 fans at City Stadium watch Red Dunn pass to halfback Johnny Blood. Blood scrambles 55 yards for the winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. The Packers beat the New York Giants 14-7. The victory proves to be the difference in the 1930 race. Green Bay takes the championship title for the second straight year.
It's a great equalizer. The fans have been there from day one. Part of it is it's a small town relative to the other NFL cities, very small, in fact.
Without the Green Bay Packers, Green Bay is just another mid-sized Midwestern town. There is no major professional team in this type of a setting. That alone is the main accomplishment of the Packers.
In November 1931, before a New York Polo Grounds crowd of 35,000, the Packers beat the New York Giants again. this time 14-10. This helps them retain the inside track on winning a third straight NFL championship.
The team with the best regular season record was called the champion.
And they become the first team to win 3 straight championships.
1929, 1930, 1931, no team had ever won 3 in a row. Their defense was the best in the league. Their offense with Red Dunn and Lavie Dilweg, Johnny Blood, was always a threat.
George Halas said Johnny Blood was the first big play specialist in the NFL.
Who was a running back, but also a fantastic receiver. He may have made an even bigger impact on the passing game.
During their 3-year championship run, the Packers played to 3 of the 6 biggest crowds in the NFL.
Winning 3 straight championships is a quite accomplishment, and no team has done it other than the Packers. We came very close to winning 4 in a row. The 32 season, we had 10-3-1 record. The Bears were 6 wins, 1 loss, and 6 ties.
The unique element to the standings was most games at that time were more low scoring, so ties were much more common. They actually had the most wins in 1932, more wins than the Chicago Bears, who actually won the NFL title in 1932.
Of course, it's before the NFL had the playoff system, so it's strictly by standings. If they had calculated the standings the way they do today, we would actually have won 4 in a row, which would have been amazing.
November 10th, 1932. The Packers embark on a 32-day, 6-game road trip to end their season.
Johnny said to me one day in the room, he said, "How'd you like to go to Hawaii?"
Less than 48 hours after their return, they head to Los Angeles, where they board an ocean liner destined for Hawaii to play 2 exhibition games, plus 2 more in California.
There were 19 of us, went over and spent 22 days on the islands. We were promoting football on the West Coast at the time, trying to establish it.
Between the 2 trips, they're gone for roughly 3 months and travel 15,000 miles.
We had to take Curly Lambeau because Curly said you can't go and use the Green Bay Packer name unless I go along. We had to give him $1,000 as the guarantee to do that.
Enter Miss California, Billy Copeland. Curly affectionately calls her Sue.
Miss California, she happened to be on the ocean liner. 2 players got in a fight over this beauty contestant, and Curly interceded and walked away with the woman. He informed Marguerite, his high school sweetheart and wife at the time of about 13 years, that he wanted a divorce.
Despite the wins, the championships, the fandom, the Packers, as well as most teams throughout the league, continue to face financial woes.
Even with the success on the field, they're not making a lot of money.
It was all based on ticket sales. There was no television.
The Great Depression eliminated wealth, huge amounts of wealth in this country.
There's financial concerns pretty much throughout that entire period.
For years, the team lost money. Throughout the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, even going into the 50s, it was a great year if we could just break even.
It was very unstable in those years, and then the instability was sort of underscored by the Depression.
It was a long time before we started seeing people buying season tickets and getting to the point where we were sold out on a regular basis. So it was tough sledding for many, many years in the National Football League.
Lots of franchises came and went.
The Depression hurt Green Bay. Yet at the same time, it really didn't affect Green Bay as much as it did a lot of other cities.
It helps that the Packers started out as a winner. It's easier to sell a winning team than a losing team, even though they had some financial concerns off the field. 1931, the second game of the season, Willard Bent was attending the game.
And he purchased a ticket for $1 for the 1931 Packers Brooklyn Dodgers game at City Stadium.
They had some temporary bleachers set up. He got up to cheer at some point, and when he went to sit down, something went wrong. He fell and injured his back, and he sued the team for $20,000.
If you read the court testimony of the trial, it came out in that testimony that Bent was an alcoholic, was suffering from an advanced case of syphilis, and was prone to falls and injuries. Nevertheless, local jury awarded the money.
A judgment came down for around $5,500. The Packers appealed all the way to the state Supreme Court, but the judgment was upheld.
Team goes to the insurance company to take care of the claim, and the insurance company doesn't have the money.
It was during the Depression. The Packers insurance company had gone bankrupt, so they weren't covered.
August 15th, 1933, the darkest day in Packers history. The Green Bay Packers go into receivership.
Now we're hurting. And thank goodness for Lee Joannis.
It is believed he loans the Packers $6,000 out of his own pocket to help the team survive.
I don't know if he ever got his money back or not, but it wasn't a problem for him to step up and put some money where his mouth was.
Without his help in that situation, who knows if the team survives?
Judge Grass picked a friendly receiver who was Frank Johnett.
Judge Henry Grass hands Johnett $76.18 in cash, along with judgments and unpaid bills amounting to more than $15,000.
Obviously, the people in Green Bay did everything they could to make sure this franchise survived their financial troubles during that period. They just sneakily put the franchise in Joannis' name. Joannis actually owned the team for the 17 months that the Packers were in receivership. I don't really think anybody knew that other than probably the inner circle.
The Packers organization, perpetually on its deathbed. Time and again, the community and its leaders refused to let go.
That is when the Hungry Five really came into play. The people that led them out of those dark days.
They were described as the Hungry Five, not because they were hungry for food, not because they were hungry for football, but because they were hungry for money.
Always able to find the funds, these long-standing Green Bay businessmen were a critical component to the survival of the franchise.
The Hungry Five, these were successful people. They had imagination and dedication.
There's Gerald Clifford, who is the attorney for the Packers. He guides them through this receivership and the leadership of Curly Lambeau, Dr. W. Kelly, Andrew Turnbull, and then Lee Joannis, who's the president at the time.
It's a civic pride in terms of being part of the Packer organization and making sure that the Packer organization keeps going.
If all the businesses in the industry would pool their resources and try to promote the city of Green Bay, all of that money could not have purchased for the city of Green Bay what the Green Bay Packers did through its spirit and pride and enthusiasm.
January 29th, 1935. Following 17 months in receivership, Green Bay's NFL franchise reorganizes as the Green Bay Packers Incorporated. Yet again, the Packers look to the community for much-needed funds, calling up the second stock sale in their history.
The team was not doing well financially, and they raised roughly $12,000, $13,000, and that money from the stock helped them to move forward past those dark days.
Another crisis that we were able to overcome because of the people in this community.
Gerald Clifford was the one who drafted the Articles of Incorporation. The second time around, they were done in such a manner that they've remained a community-owned team.
Of course, Curly continued to produce good football teams.
He knew how to pick talent. That was his one quality, I think, that superseded everything else.
Added to the mix is a tough and wily guy by the name of Hinkle.
He was a fullback at 202 pounds, linebacker. He averaged over 58 minutes a game. He did the kicking as well.
The old-timers used to tell me Clark Hinkle was Jim Taylor on offense and Ray Nitschke on defense. Pretty hard to top that.
You just look at photos of Hinkle at the time, he looks like he's gonna be vicious about to hit someone, and it's almost scary.
He was a phenomenal football player.
Tougher than a rattlesnake was how one of his teammates described him.
He left in 1942 and enlisted in the service for World War II and never played after that. When he left, he was a leading rusher in the history of the National Football League. Later.
Buckets Goldenberg, 1933 to 1945. Longest tenure of any player in Packers history during the Lambeau years. An outstanding guard.
An immigrant from Odessa, Ukraine, who moved to Milwaukee at the age of 4. He played college football for the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
I always dreamed of playing football with the Green Bay Packers. Even though I could make more money with another team.
So much of it is what Curly did. He had that eye for talent. He just knew what he was looking for in a player.
He built championship teams here with total free agency.
Throughout the entire decade of the 20s into the 30s, there was no college draft. So it was very important which players you could lure to play in your team.
One such player, Arnie Herber.
Considered one of the greatest long passers of all time. His fingers were short and stubby, so he couldn't grip the football the way a normal quarterback would.
First passer in the history of the league to pass for 1,000 yards. Green Bay native. Pro Football Hall of Famer.
As far as throwing the long pass, 50, 60, 70 yards. And a competitor from the word go. He taught me an awful lot about the long pass.
We were out in California playing a few exhibition games. And MGM made a little movie about the Green Bay Packers. And when we went out on the movie set one day, they had hung up a pane of glass 3 feet square on the goalpost. And they gave Herber the ball at the 50-yard line and told him to throw it through the glass.
He threw the pass before the cameras are on.
Correct!
And broke the window pane. And they asked him, he told him he had to do it again, and he broke the pane the second time.
He threw the first 2 right through the glass from 50 yards. Now that's accuracy with a football.
Arnie Herber needed that end that could stretch the field, and they got such an end in Mr. Don Hutson in 1935.
Known as the Alabama Antelope, Curly's recruitment of Hutson is a key factor to the Packers' success.
He makes big plays, catches touchdown passes.
He had an ability to go out for a pass, kind of fool the defender into thinking, well, Don's at top speed, I'm staying with him. And then he'd kick it into another gear, and he'd separate and make the catch.
There were not a lot of teams in the NFL at the time that featured the passing game the way Curly did, and that helped make Packers very successful.
With Arnie Herber having somebody he could throw the ball deep to, that really broke the team out of a slump.
The NFL draft was not established until 1936, so that was the year after we got Hutson.
We were getting ready to go to California to play in a Rose Bowl. And there was a fellow named Shipwreck Kelly, owned the Brooklyn team. And he came down to see me. He said, if you will promise me that you will sign with Brooklyn, if I meet the best price you can get from anybody else, I'll give you $500 in spending money.
The popular narrative is that Hutson eventually signed with both teams, and NFL President Joe Carr awarded him to Green Bay. There is little or no evidence Hutson signed with football's Brooklyn Dodgers. In fact, Hutson denied it at the time, and the NFL has no record of it.
If I had gone to Brooklyn, I might have never had a career in pro ball at all. They had no passer. That was strictly a Ohio State offense.
His impact is immediate. He is not without his critics.
There was actually a business guy in Green Bay who had a radio show.
Emmett Platten, 6'4", 230 pounds, outspoken fan, local radio personality, Packers shareholder.
He would criticize anybody he wanted to in Green Bay because he was such a big guy, no one was going to take him on.
He was sort of irascible, too.
Oh, yeah. He was...
kind of a black sheep in the family, really.
Yeah, he was.
He was a Packer fanatic, and he would rent time on the local radio stations to criticize Curly Lambeau's everything about him.
We'd be in the locker room and everybody listened because he's critical of Lambeau. And this time he spent his entire 30-minute program telling what a lousy deal he made in signing Don Hutson.
He talked about Hutson saying that he was not big enough, he wasn't going to last, he wasn't impressed with him. This kind of motivated Hutson.
Packers are playing the Bears, second week of the 1935 season. was the Packers' first play from scrimmage. Ernie Herbert takes the ball, fades back to his 4-yard line. Hudson is streaking toward midfield, and Ernie Herbert lets that ball go.
On the first play, I caught a pass for 80 yards for a touchdown.
That's the first time the Packers have ever scored on the very first play of the game.
That 83-yard pass silenced them.
And that was the last we heard about this guy on the radio for a while.
October 27th, 1935. The Packers play the Bears for the second time this season.
Still down here at Wrigley Field, ladies and gentlemen, in Chicago. Play about to get underway again. There's been timeout. The score is 14-10 in favor of the Bears.
The Bears fumbled like on the first play, and the Packers got the ball back.
There's the whistle calling the boys back into action. First down, 10 to go.
Packers have the ball at about the 30, 35-yard line. Run a couple plays, they're down to the 4-yard line. Time's running out. Herbert to Hudson again. We win the game. 2 touchdowns by Hudson in the last 3. I can still remember my Aunt Eleanor screaming at the radio.
Herbert to Hudson, an unstoppable combination, game after game.
It goes back to Curly Lambeau and Don Hudson being really pioneers of the passing game in the National Football League.
The legendary Don Hudson, as they say. You can't say Don Hudson unless you say legendary Don Hudson.
In grade school and in high school, the Packers, and especially Don Hudson, were more important than girls.
The following year, September 20th, 1936, the first Packers-Bears game of the season is at City Stadium. Over 14,000 fans attend, including the infamous Emmett Platten.
Emmett went to all the games. He was a consummate fan, okay? And he hated the people, whoever came to play. And sometimes it got kind of rough.
This Bears tackle was continuously offside, and the referees never called it. Emmett had it, and he leaped over the rail, punched this guy out.
He got so mad that he came out of the stands, across the track, and went right out on the field and knocked the heck, not the word heck, but knocked the heck out of the person who was coming after the Packers.
A Bear player.
They had to take the guy out of the game.
They ended up landing a punch to the jaw of Ted Rosequist of the Bears and knocked him flat. Of course, in those days, that was no great transgression. And then the next day, he wrote a letter to the Press-Gazette defending himself and wrote that somebody had to do something over this rotten official.
An excerpt from Platten's letter reads, "As a Packer stockholder looking out for the interests of this corporation, I tried to approach the ref to remind him of his faithful promise to give unbiased decisions." The Press-Gazette's response: "Mr. Platten will have a hard time convincing football fans that Mr. Rosequist took the first swing at him. Did not Mr. Platten have one of these sudden outbursts of temper at some other Chicago-Green Bay game? More power and good football for the Packers, with less noise from Mr. Platten." The Packers are championship-bound for the first time in 5 years, set to play the Boston Redskins for the title.
The NFL had enacted a playoff system. They divided the league into 2 divisions in 1933 and enacted a championship game, and that was the Packers' first.
The 3 that they won previously, they were awarded by which team finished on top of the standings. Now there's a playoff. If you're in the Western Conference, you have to play the winner from the East.
It was played at a neutral site. The rules of the day called for the Eastern Division and Western Division champions to rotate hosting the game.
Boston and Green Bay play the 1936 championship game in New York City. The Packers' practice field? Central Park.
We played the Boston Redskins, but the championship game was played in New York at the Polo Grounds.
The interesting story about 1936 is the Boston Redskins, and Boston's ownership at the time is not happy with the attendance.
George Preston Marshall, who was the owner of the Redskins, was very upset with the city of Boston's support of his team. That's why he moved the championship game to New York.
So the NFL championship game is actually played in a neutral setting.
It's the only NFL championship game that was ever played at a neutral site prior to the Super Bowl era.
The significance of the fourth NFL championship would be this is the first NFL title that's won playing an NFL championship game.
Another party, big banquet at the Columbus Club. Prohibition's over, so it's legal to drink.
Lambeau's scouting abilities and recruitment skills keep the team strong.
You didn't just run 1 or 2 players in a game. You used 4 or 5 or 6 different running backs. And these running backs had to be able to block, and they had to be able to occasionally pass the ball and catch the ball.
In 1938, the Packers added Cecil Isbell. He was a great all-around back.
Herbert was starting to get towards the end of his career, but Isbell, he was a tremendous passer.
Isbell was special. In his rookie year already, George Halas said that the difference between the Packers from the previous year was that Isbell was already better than Arnie Herbert.
Yes, in those days that I controlled the game, basically. I had the running ability and the knack of moving, but of course, I always could throw the ball well.
Isbell was a runner, he was a passer, and he would go on to become the first player in NFL history to throw for more than 2,000 yards.
I loved the game and went out there to play it, and play the best of my ability and to win. And a person knows when he's performed, when he hasn't. Because if he hasn't put out 110% effort, he's got no business in a uniform.
He led the NFL in passing in 42 and retired after the season.
I was offered a job at my alma mater, Purdue University, as a coach, looking for the future. I felt that would probably be the better for me. There's no question about it. If you got the afterthought, if it means anything, I should have continued playing.
He regretted his decision for the rest of his life. Had he not retired, I can't imagine that he wouldn't be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
That year, Curly had drafted Charlie Brock. This would be 1939. I don't think you could find a better football player than Charlie Brock, defensively and offensively.
He was really a ball hawk. He was a very steady player. He played center, and he was also a linebacker on the defense.
Charlie Brock was as great a pass defender as any linebacker we ever had at Green Bay. He was uncanny if you're smelling a forward pass over the middle. He saved a lot of games for us with his ability to intercept passes and stay in his zone.
Big names and big plays simply aren't enough to bring in the money the Packers so desperately need.
The league had gotten rid of all its other small-town franchises. Serious questions were raised about whether Green Bay was big enough. Teams were now reluctant to come to Green Bay because of the small gates.
Curly Lambeau decided to play games in Milwaukee because he thought Green Bay wasn't big enough.
The annual NFL owners meeting in 1938. Determined to keep a stronghold in Wisconsin, Packers president Lee Joannes presses owners to extend Green Bay's territorial rights to include Milwaukee. The owners' vote is unanimous. The future seems secure.
The fact that they were granted that territory and that Lee Joannes took that impetus was critical to their survival.
This little town couldn't support us. We would have lost this team. We needed Milwaukee, and they saved us.
The idea of expanding the Packers' territory may generate cash, but certainly controversy. Curly Lambeau in an interview with the Milwaukee Journal, November 1939. If the Packers host the NFL championship game, it'll be played at State Fair Park in Milwaukee. It will not be played in Green Bay's City Stadium. Curly creates an uproar.
1939 NFL championship game, the first time the Packers actually host NFL championship game. It's played in Milwaukee.
You're finally in a championship game, and it's not going to be played in your city? That did not sit well with a lot of people.
That was the fifth of the 6 championships that they won under Curly Lambeau, and they had yet to have a championship game here.
Fans approached the Association of Commerce to demand the game be played in Green Bay, to no avail.
They played in State Fair Park, which was held about 32,000. They added some seats for the championship game, but that brought in a lot more income than if the game had been played in Green Bay.
Packers president Lee Joannes explains the rationale. Due to NFL pressure and the fact that the gate could be almost $30,000 greater with increased capacity at State Fair Park. For a team that is perpetually on the precipice of peril, it is hard to argue.
We had to be more than just Green Bay. We had to be a state team. If we're just going to stay in Green Bay, we're not going to make it.
The Packers dispose of the New York Giants 27-0 in Milwaukee.
The fans really felt cheated. They were upset with Lambeau. They were upset with Lee Joannes.
Despite their fury, thousands of fans gather at the Green Bay Freight Depot to welcome the Packers home.
All was forgotten after they won, and Lambeau made a point of thanking them for embracing the players and him again after winning the championship.
It's winning it all. Otherwise, we're not going to celebrate it, and I love that.
The town went wild. And of course, Curly was acclaimed, and he was a hero.
Lambeau said, "It's swell of Green Bay fans to give us such a turnout. We didn't think they would because they were sore about the playoff site." Packers co-founder and his storied team close out the football season with their 5th NFL title.
5 championships in that short a time.
The prize for the last 2 of those championships, the Ed Thorpe Memorial Trophy.
In 1934, the National Football League renamed its championship trophy the Ed Thorpe Trophy in honor of a notable official, a referee named Ed Thorpe.
For most of its lifetime, the Thorpe Trophy was mistakenly called the Jim Thorpe Trophy. But it went to the championship team, and the Packers won it more than anybody else.
Introduced in 1934, it is awarded to the NFL champion until 1969. In all, Lambeau's Packers will win it 3 times. Success should have been inevitable.
You start in the 20s. Their first sponsor, once they join the NFL, Acme Packing, goes broke before the first season is over. They get back in it, and then a few years later, the league cuts most of its small-town franchises. Green Bay survives again. Then you've got the Depression. You've got the Packers going into receivership. Those aren't little things, little obstacles to clear. I mean, it was one calamity after another.
But when it comes to football, our team on the field can beat your team. The fans have been there. The cast of characters has been incredible.
Lambeau, the only coach the team has ever known, 20 years at the helm.
He treated you like a man. They knew that you should know what it takes really to be a winner.
The legacy that he built here, with all the championships he had here, the caliber of players he had here. I don't think people realize the impact that he had on the game initially, how he changed the game, Curly Lambeau.
Draft didn't come into being until 1936. So Curly had signed a goodly number of players on his own prior to then. At one point, he offered Gerald Ford a contract. Saw him at the East-West game in San Francisco.
The coach of the Green Bay Packers, Curly Lambeau, offered me $200 a game in 14 games. When I got I thought a better offer from Yale University to be an assistant coach, and I could go to law school, that looked like a better deal.
President Ford just wisely decided to go to law school at Yale and become president of the United States. It turned out to be the better part for him, I guess. By the way, Gerald Ford came to Green Bay in 1976 to formally dedicate the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame.